Of all the names that glitter in the firmament of country music, few shine with the enduring brilliance of Ray Price. He was the Cherokee Cowboy, a titan whose velvet baritone could soothe a broken heart or fill a dance hall floor. His career spanned over 6 decades, a bridge between the honky-tonk grit of his friend Hank Williams and the lush orchestral polish of the Nashville sound he helped create. His songs are more than music. They are American heirlooms, passed down through generations. But for every star that captures the spotlight, there is a story that unfolds in the shadows. This is one of those stories. It's the story of a man who spent his entire life just a few feet away from the legend, a man whose voice was often heard but whose name was rarely known. He was the keeper of the flame, the road warrior, the band leader, the one constant presence behind the throne. He was Clifton Ray Price Jr., the only son of Ray Price. And his journey far from the glamour of the Grand Ole Opry is a saga of profound dedication, quiet sacrifice, and a heart-wrenching battle over the very legacy he spent a lifetime helping to build. It's a story about what happens when the music stops, the lights go down, and a family finds itself wrestling with the ghosts of love, loyalty, and the law. To understand the world that Clifton Price was born into, you have to picture Nashville in the 1950s. This wasn't the slick corporate music city of today. It was a town brimming with raw talent and restless ambition, a place where a new American art form was being forged in smoky bars and unassuming recording studios. At the heart of this revolution was Ray Price. He wasn't just another singer, he was an innovator. Fresh from the mentorship of his one-time roommate, the tragic and brilliant Hank Williams, Ray was determined to carve his own path. He established a sound that was both rooted in tradition and daringly forward-thinking. He took the raw emotion of honky-tonk and gave it a driving, infectious 4/4 beat that became his signature, the Ray Price Shuffle. It was music made for dancing, for forgetting your troubles, a sound that powered hits like Crazy Arms and made him a superstar. It was during this meteoric rise in April of 1957 that Ray married Betty Berthina Greb. She was a performer in her own right, a singer who went by the stage name Linda Powers. Their union was a brief Nashville-style romance, forged in the whirlwind of the music business. And from this marriage came one child, a son, Clifton Ray Price Jr. While public records are scarce, it's believed he was born in the late 1950s, just as his father's career was reaching its zenith. But the marriage between Ray and Betty didn't last. In the world of a touring musician, where the road is a demanding mistress, family life often takes a back seat. They divorced, and Ray would eventually remarry. For young Cliff, this meant growing up in a world defined not by a quiet home in a leafy suburb, but by the constant rumble of a tour bus engine and the echo of his father's voice from a distant stage. He grew up in Texas and Nashville, but his true home was the backstage world of country music. From his earliest years, Cliff's life was an apprenticeship. It wasn't a formal education in a classroom, but a deep, immersive schooling in the life of a working musician. While other kids were playing Little League, Cliff was learning the intricate fretwork of a Fender Telecaster. While they were memorizing history dates, he was memorizing the entire Ray Price catalog, from the deep cuts to the chart-topping hits. He absorbed the music by osmosis. The iconic Ray Price Shuffle wasn't just a rhythm he heard on the radio. It was the soundtrack to his life, a beat he could feel in his bones. He didn't just watch from the wings, he became an indispensable part of the machinery. By the time he was in his 20s, he was no longer just the boss's son. He was a professional, a full-fledged member of the road crew, and eventually the band. In a 2013 Facebook post, Cliff himself laid out his long-standing role with a mix of pride and matter-of-fact humility. "I have opened all the shows for my dad for over 20 years, he wrote. "I also run the stage." Think about what that means. Running the stage isn't a ceremonial title. It's the grunt work. It's being the first one at the venue and the last one to leave. It's managing the crew, checking the sound, making sure every microphone, every cable, every amplifier is perfect before the star ever steps into the light. It's solving problems on the fly, placating demanding promoters, and ensuring the show goes on night after night, city after city. On top of that, he was a musician in the band, playing rhythm guitar and singing backup vocals, his voice blending with his father's in a harmony that was both genetic and practiced. For over 2 decades, this was his life. He was the opening act. He would step out first, warm up the crowd, and then stay on stage as his father took the spotlight, anchoring the rhythm section of the legendary Cherokee Cowboys. This wasn't a case of simple nepotism. It was a testament to his skill and his father's trust. Ray Price was a notorious perfectionist. He wouldn't have tolerated anyone on his stage, let alone his own son, who couldn't cut it. There's a telling piece of footage from a 1994 television appearance. It's a performance of the classic song Heart Over Mind. But in this version, the roles are reversed. Cliff is singing lead, his voice clear and confident, carrying the melody. And there, standing beside him, is the legend, Ray Price, dutifully singing the harmony part for his son. It's a powerful and poignant image, a public passing of the torch, or at the very least, a profound acknowledgement of Cliff's talent. Ray is, for a moment, the supporting player in his son's performance, a quiet nod of approval from a man not known for handing out praise lightly. This was the dynamic for years. Cliff wasn't just preserving the legacy, he was actively performing it, night after night. As Ray aged, Cliff's role became even more critical. He became the frontman of the Cherokee Cowboys, leading the band and keeping the music tight and true to its roots. A 2008 review of a show in Bakersfield, California, from the newspaper The Renegade Rip, notes it succinctly. Opening the show for Price was his son, Cliff Price. The younger Price now fronts the Cherokee Cowboys. He was the generational bridge, the man who ensured that the sound his father had created would continue vibrant and alive for a new generation of fans. He was living the ultimate insider's life in country music, yet he remained an outsider to the fame that came with it. He had the grueling schedule of a star without the public adoration. He was, in essence, the custodian of his father's sound, a role he performed with unwavering, quiet loyalty for the better part of his adult life. He was the son in the shadow, but he was also the man who made sure the stage was always perfectly lit for his father. The bond between a father and son who also work together is a uniquely complex thing. It's a relationship built on love, but also on payrolls, on family history, but also on professional expectations. For Cliff and Ray Price, this dynamic played out over hundreds of thousands of miles on the road, in the shared intimacy of a tour bus and the public pressure of the stage. For decades, Cliff was more than just a son. He was Ray's right-hand man, his musical confidant, and the engine that kept the show running. Imagine the conversations that must have taken place after the crowds went home, the post-mortems of a performance, the fine-tuning of an arrangement, the shared language that only musicians who have spent countless hours together can understand. Cliff knew every nuance of his father's craft, every pause, every vocal inflection, every chord change. He didn't just play the music, he inhabited it. His contributions weren't limited to the stage. When a live album titled Big Hits, Live from Last of the Breed, was released for Record Store Day in 2021, The liner notes officially credited Cliff Price as the acoustic guitarist for the Cherokee Cowboys. It was a small but significant acknowledgement, cementing his place in the official discography of his father's storied career. He was part of the band, part of the history, woven into the fabric of the music itself. This deep, lifelong connection is what makes the events that unfolded during Ray Price's final days so profoundly tragic. In late 2012, Ray was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The titan of country music, the man who had seemed indestructible on stage for 60 years, was facing his own mortality. He fought it with the same tenacity he brought to his career, undergoing treatment while still trying to plan for the future. But by late 2013, the battle was nearing its end. Ray Price entered hospice care at his sprawling ranch in Mount Pleasant, Texas, surrounded by his second wife, Janie, whom he had married in 1970. And this is where the story takes a painful public turn. A chasm, which had perhaps been forming for years beneath the surface, suddenly ripped wide open. On December 15, 2013, the country music world was rocked by the news that Ray Price had died. The source of this news was none other than his son, Cliff. In a statement posted to his Facebook page, Cliff announced his father's passing. The news spread like wildfire. Major media outlets, from local Texas stations to international news organizations, immediately published obituaries. Tributes began pouring in from fellow artists and heartbroken fans. The world began to mourn a legend, but the story was wrong. Just as the news reached its peak, a startling correction came from the Price Ranch. Janie Price, Ray's wife, issued a statement forcefully refuting the announcement. Ray Price, she insisted, was still alive. He was gravely ill, she conceded, but he had not yet passed. In her own words, he was departing on his own terms. The media was thrown into a state of whiplash and confusion. Obituaries were hastily retracted. News anchors had to issue on-air corrections. And at the center of this bewildering and painful episode was Cliff. He was forced to publicly withdraw his own announcement of his father's death, offering a brief, pained explanation. He claimed he had been deceived by a number of people and had made the announcement based on false information given to him. As he told one reporter, "I was unfortunately and terribly misled by some cruel people." The incident was deeply embarrassing, a private family tragedy that had become a public spectacle. But it was more than just a miscommunication. It was a stark and brutal illustration of the fractured lines of communication within the Price family. Cliff, the son who had spent his life by his father's side on the road, was not at the ranch in those final hours. He was receiving information secondhand, a painful exclusion that was now laid bare for the entire world to see. Whether he was cruelly misled or simply the victim of a chaotic and emotional situation, the result was the same. He had been cut out of the final sacred moments of his father's life. Ray Price would officially pass away the following day, on December 16, 2013. But the wounds from that premature announcement would fester, setting the stage for a bitter conflict that would tarnish his legacy for years to come. The grief that follows the death of a parent is a heavy burden under any circumstances. But for Cliff Price, that burden was almost immediately compounded by a legal war that would prove to be as protracted and painful as his father's illness. The fragile peace of shared mourning was shattered before it could even begin. The conflict that had simmered beneath the surface, exploding into public view with the false death announcement, now moved from the realm of social media to the cold, unforgiving world of the Texas court system. On December 17, 2013, the day after his father was laid to rest, Cliff Price filed a legal motion in Titus County, Texas. He sought to have his father's will entered into probate, the official process of validating a will and distributing an estate. It was the opening salvo in what would become a years-long, deeply acrimonious battle with his stepmother, Janie Price. The dispute quickly devolved into a series of ugly accusations and counter-accusations, spilling out into public view and chronicled in detail by outlets like Saving Country Music, a publication dedicated to preserving the genre's history. The battle lines were drawn pitting the only son against the devoted wife. Cliff's side of the story was one of painful exclusion. He alleged that in his father's final fading days, he had been deliberately kept away. He claimed that he and other family members were effectively locked out of the ranch, prevented from saying their final goodbyes. It was a devastating accusation, painting a picture of a son desperate to see his dying father, only to be denied by his stepmother. This narrative cast the subsequent legal fight, not just as a financial dispute, but as a fight for his rightful place in his father's story, a story from which he felt he was being erased. Janie Price's perspective was predictably, starkly different. She fired back, portraying Cliff's legal actions as a heartless and greedy cash grab. The battle escalated dramatically on September 21, 2016, when Janie posted a long, emotional, open letter on Facebook. In it, she accused Cliff and his legal team of trying to force a fire sale of Ray's entire estate. She claimed their goal was to sell everything and divide it up, from the master recordings and publishing rights to Ray's cherished collection of firearms and personal memorabilia. She painted a picture of a legacy under siege. According to her, the legal wrangling had become so contentious that at one point, the court had to step in and appoint a receiver, a neutral third party tasked with taking control of Ray Price's assets to prevent them from being sold or squandered while the two sides fought. This is a drastic legal measure, one that underscores the complete breakdown of trust between the two parties. The case became a tangled web of motions, countersuits, and appeals. It was fought in local Texas courts and eventually made its way to the 6th Court of Appeals in Texarkana. For years, the legal machinery ground on, all while the physical relics of Ray Price's incredible life, the master tapes containing unreleased music, the custom-made stage outfits, the gold records, the handwritten notes, sat in limbo, held hostage by the dispute. The ultimate irony is that both Cliff and Janie publicly stated that they wanted the same thing: to preserve Ray's legacy. Both spoke of a desire to create a museum to honor his life and career, a place where fans could come and appreciate the history he made. Yet their inability to find common ground became the very obstacle that prevented any such plan from moving forward. The dream of a museum, a shared goal, was sacrificed at the altar of their mutual distrust. As of the mid-2020s, the legal records remain largely sealed, the final resolution hidden from public view. We don't know the ultimate disposition of the publishing rights or the master tapes, but we do know the consequences. The conflict ensured that in the crucial years following his death, Ray Price's legacy couldn't be properly curated, celebrated, or shared. The man who brought so much joy to millions with his music left behind a family so fractured they couldn't agree on how to honor him. For Cliff, the son who had dedicated his life to his father's music, the final chapter of that music was being written not in a recording studio, but in a series of bitter court filings. In the years following the peak of the legal firestorm, Clifton Price seemed to retreat from the public eye, his presence becoming more sporadic. The relentless rhythm of the road that had defined his life for so long slowed to a near halt. The COVID-19 pandemic shut down live music venues across the globe, forcing a quiet end to the era of constant touring that had been his world. After the lockdown, his appearances became fewer and farther between. In 2021, his name surfaced on the Record Store Day release of the live album, a ghost from a past performance. Between 2023 and 2024, there were scattered reports of small shows in Texas, with bills sometimes reading Cliff Price and Cherokee Cowboys. But these were no longer the long, grueling national tours of his father's heyday. They were echoes, nostalgic gatherings in small town halls, a far cry from the big stages he had once managed. By 2025, there were no major tours or new recording projects on the horizon. He continued to live a quiet life in the Dallas area, the same location listed in his father's 2013 obituary. The man who had been a constant driving force behind one of country music's greatest road shows had, for the most part, gone home. The conflict over the estate had one final tragic consequence. It stalled the momentum of his own career. Just as he was positioned to carry the torch for the Cherokee Cowboys, to be the natural successor to the live legacy, the energy was diverted. The fight over the past consumed the future. The very name he shared with his father, once a source of immense pride and professional identity, had also become the source of a profound and public struggle. In a strange footnote to his story, there is a common point of confusion that illustrates the quiet, behind-the-scenes nature of his life. In Dallas, there is a well-known and successful businessman, also named Cliff Price, who runs a prominent wholesale company specializing in gifts and home decor. This company, Cliff Price & Company, has been a fixture in the Dallas Market Center for decades. For years, researchers and fans have wondered if this successful entrepreneur was the same man who played guitar for the Cherokee Cowboys. However, there has never been any credible source linking the two. The consensus among country music historians is that they are two different men, a coincidence of names that only highlights how little the public knew about the private life of Ray Price's only son. The son's story, therefore, remains one of immense contribution and unresolved conflict. He was not a Nashville recording star in the traditional sense. He doesn't have a string of hit albums to his name. His legacy isn't measured in gold records, but in the thousands of nights he spent making sure the show went on. He was the essential, invisible man. His historical significance lies in that unique liminal space he occupied. He was the human bridge connecting the golden era of Ray Price to the present day. He was the living preservationist of the Ray Price Shuffle, the man who kept the Cherokee Cowboys engine running as its iconic leader aged. And finally, he became the face of the bloodline side of a bitter estate battle, a symbol of the complex, often painful intersection of family, money, and memory. Cliff Price's journey is a powerful, poignant example of both the privilege and the burden of being the son of a legend. He inherited the talent and the access, but also the long shadow and the eventual painful disputes. He was given a front row seat to history, but also a central role in its complicated, messy aftermath. His story is a testament to the fact that a legacy is not just what is left behind, but what is fought for after the leaving. So what are we to make of the story of Clifton Ray Price Jr.? His is not a simple narrative of triumph or tragedy. It's a story lived in the quiet spaces between the lines of a famous biography, a life defined by a profound and perhaps profoundly complicated devotion. For over 20 years, he was the ultimate musical steward. He didn't just ride on his father's coattails. He was the one making sure the coattails were clean and pressed for every show. He sacrificed a career of his own to support his father's, choosing the role of the loyal sideman, the reliable stage manager, the son who kept the music alive. In that, there is a deep and admirable integrity. He was a craftsman, a working musician who understood that the glamour of the spotlight is supported by the hard work done in the shadows. Yet, his story is also a cautionary tale about the corrosive power of unresolved family conflict. The final years of his public life were defined not by music, but by litigation. The harmony he once sang with his father was replaced by the discord of legal filings. The public nature of the feud, the premature death announcement, the dueling Facebook posts, the accusations of greed and exclusion, left an indelible stain on the final chapter of Ray Price's life. It's a story that forces us to look beyond the rhinestone facade of celebrity and see the fragile, flawed, and deeply human relationships that lie beneath. It reminds us that legacies are not monolithic monuments carved in stone. They are living, breathing things, susceptible to the same passions, resentments, and heartbreaks that affect us all. Clifton Price's journey is, in the end, the story of a son's love and a son's grievance. He stands as a living embodiment of his father's complicated heritage, the glorious music and the painful disputes, the deep familial bond and the bitter legal chasm. The final notes of the Ray Price saga are still being contested, not on a stage, but in the quiet chambers of memory and law. And at the very heart of that unfinished score remains his only son, a man who gave his life to the music, only to find himself fighting for his piece of the silence that followed.